I watched the last car pull out of the school parking lot as the sun dipped behind the football field, painting everything in shades of orange that felt more lonely than beautiful. It was 7:47 p.m. School had ended at 3:15. My phone had died an hour ago. I'd called mom 6 times before the battery gave out. Then dad. Then my older sister, Rachel. No one answered. No one came. The janitor, Mr. Peterson, had checked on me twice, his weathered face creasing with concern. "You sure someone's coming, sweetie?" He'd asked the second time. "Yes, absolutely." I'd lied, my 13-year-old pride refusing to admit what I already knew in my bones. They'd forgotten me. Again. But this time felt different. This time, they hadn't just been 20 minutes late. This time, 4.5 hours had passed. "I'm locking up now," Mr. Peterson said gently. "I can give you a ride if—" "My mom just texted," I lied again, holding up my dead phone. "She's almost here." He looked uncertain but nodded. "You take care, Emma." I waited until his truck disappeared down the street before I started walking. 7 miles. I knew because I'd mapped it once, during one of those nights when I couldn't sleep, when I'd lie in bed and imagine all the ways I could just disappear and wonder how long it would take them to notice. The answer, I was learning, was longer than you'd think. My backpack dug into my shoulders, heavy with textbooks they never asked if I needed help with. My feet in shoes that were half a size too small because you just got new ones 6 months ago, Emma. Money doesn't grow on trees. Began to ache after the first mile. But I kept walking. I kept walking because something had crystallized in my chest during those hours of waiting. Something cold and sharp and clarifying. A decision. A promise to myself. I would never ask them for anything again. What I didn't know, as I trudged down Maple Street while families ate dinner behind warm yellow windows, was that this walk would change everything. That the grandmother I barely remembered, who my parents claimed was difficult and not someone we associate with, had been watching, waiting, and that she'd been kept away from me for reasons that had nothing to do with her character and everything to do with her money. A lot of money. Money my parents desperately wanted and were willing to sacrifice their youngest daughter to get. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to the beginning, to help you understand exactly how I became the girl left waiting at school for nearly 5 hours on a Tuesday in October. I was born the second daughter to Margaret and David Chen, 3 years after my sister Rachel. In the photo albums that stop around the time I turned 5, you can see it in my parents' faces. The slight disappointment, the forced smiles. Another girl. Not the son they'd hoped for, not the child who would carry on the family name with the weight they imagined it deserved. Rachel, at least, had been first, special by virtue of being the beginning of their parenting journey. The one they'd decorated an entire nursery for, the one whose baby book was filled with meticulous notes about first words and first steps. My baby book had 3 entries, but the real shift, the moment my position in the family became truly clear, happened when I was 6 years old. That was when grandmother Vivian came to visit, the last time I would see her for years. She was magnificent in a way I couldn't articulate then, but that made perfect sense later. Tall and straight-backed, with silver hair and an elegant chignon, and clothes that whispered money rather than shouting it. She drove a Mercedes that my father eyed with naked want. "Hello, little one," she'd said, kneeling down to my level in our cramped living room. Her perfume smelled like roses and something expensive. "You must be Emma." "Yes, ma'am," I'd said, suddenly shy. "Your eyes," she'd murmured, studying my face with an intensity that should have been uncomfortable but somehow wasn't. "You have the Chen eyes. Like my mother, your great-grandmother. Strong. Intelligent." She'd glanced at Rachel, who was preening nearby in a new dress, then back to me and my hand-me-downs. Something flickered across her face. Understanding, perhaps. Or recognition. "Mom, we should talk," my father had said, his voice tight. "In private." What happened in the kitchen during that conversation, I wouldn't learn until much later. But I heard the raised voices, heard grandmother Vivian say something about conditions and fairness, and both granddaughters. I heard my mother's sharp retort about interfering and our family, our choices. Grandmother Vivian left that day and didn't come back. "She's a difficult woman," my mother explained later, her lips pursed. "Very controlling. Always has been. We've decided it's better if she's not in our lives right now. When can I see her again? I'd asked. We'll see, my father had said, in the tone that meant never. Years later, I would understand. Grandmother Vivian, a wealthy widow who'd built her late husband's modest business into a pharmaceutical empire, had seen something that day. She'd seen how my parents fawned over Rachel and overlooked me. She'd seen the difference in our clothes, our treatment, the way they lit up for one daughter and went through the motions for the other. And she'd made her offer contingent on equal treatment, equal love, equal investment in both granddaughters. My parents had chosen the money over me. Or rather, they'd chosen to cut grandmother out rather than admit they couldn't love me the way they loved Rachel. They gambled that eventually she'd relent, that she'd give them access to her wealth without conditions. She never did. And so began my childhood as the forgotten daughter. It started small. Rachel got piano lessons. I got maybe next year. Rachel got the new winter coat. I got her old one, taken in at the seams. Rachel got help with homework at the dining room table. I figured it out alone in my room or failed quietly. Rachel is older. She needs more right now, was the constant refrain. You understand, don't you, Emma? I learned to understand. I learned to need less, ask for less, expect less. I learned to be invisible, because being visible meant being a burden, meant seeing that flicker of annoyance cross my mother's face, meant hearing my father sigh like I was one more bill he couldn't quite afford to pay. Rachel, for her part, soaked up the attention like a flower turning toward the sun. She wasn't cruel exactly, she simply didn't notice. How could she? She'd never known anything different. In her world, she was the star, and I was the supporting character whose main role was to make her shine brighter by comparison. By the time I was 10, the pattern was so established it was almost comfortable in its predictability. I knew not to expect much. I knew not to complain. I knew that if I needed something, I'd better figure out how to get it myself. I got my first job at 12, technically illegally, helping Mrs. Rodriguez down the street with her garden every weekend. $5 an hour, cash. I used it to buy my own school supplies, my own snacks, the small things that other kids took for granted. I learned to alter my own clothes, to fix my own problems, to be entirely self-sufficient in a house where I was merely tolerated rather than treasured. And through it all, I kept my grades perfect. Not because anyone noticed or cared, but because some stubborn part of me refused to let their neglect become my failure. I would be excellent despite them, not because of them. The forgetting started around the time I turned 12. Small things at first. Missing my parent-teacher conference while attending Rachel's play. Forgetting to buy me a birthday cake while throwing Rachel an elaborate Sweet 16. Running out of grocery money after buying Rachel's homecoming dress, leaving me to eat ramen for a week. Sorry, honey, it slipped my mind, became my mother's signature phrase. Things are just so busy. They were busy, of course. Busy with Rachel's college applications, Rachel's boyfriend drama, Rachel's everything. Rachel was 17 and applying to prestigious schools, and every dinner conversation revolved around SAT scores and campus visits, and whether Cornell or Brown had the better program for her intended major. I was 13 and invisible, but that day, that October Tuesday when I turned 13 and a half, not that anyone remembered or cared, was different. That was the day they forgot to pick me up after my academic decathlon practice. The practice I'd mentioned at breakfast, reminded them about at lunch via text, and confirmed the timing of in a note on the refrigerator. That was the day I waited and waited and waited. That was the day I walked 7 miles home in shoes that gave me blisters, while my phone died and the sky went dark. That was the day I stopped being their daughter in any meaningful way and became something else entirely. A survivor, a strategist, someone with nothing left to lose. I reached our street at 9:23 p.m. Every light in our modest 2-story home was blazing. Through the dining room window, I could see them all seated around the table, dinner in full swing, laughing. No one looked worried. No one was checking their phone. No one had even noticed I wasn't there. My hand was on the doorknob when I paused. Through the door, I could hear Rachel's voice, animated and excited. And then Professor Matthews said my essay was the best he'd seen in 10 years. Can you believe it? He wants to use it as an example for his next class. That's wonderful, sweetheart, my mother gushed. I always knew you were special, my father added, his voice warm with pride I'd never heard directed at me. Something inside me, something that had been bending for years, finally snapped. Not with sound, but with silence. With a cold, clear certainty. I turned around. Instead of going inside, I walked to the garage. My old bicycle, the one I'd learned to ride at 8 with no help because everyone was busy watching Rachel's soccer game, was still there. I aired up the tires with the ancient pump, tested the brakes, and got on. Then I rode to the one place I'd been forbidden to go since I was 6 years old. 15 minutes later, I stood in front of the gates of the Vivian Chen estate. I'd found the address years ago, one sleepless night when I'd Googled my grandmother's name and discovered she lived only 3 miles from our house, so close. An entire childhood, and she'd been so close. The house beyond the gates was everything ours wasn't. Elegant, established, serene. Lights glowed warmly from tall windows. A fountain gurgled somewhere in the gardens. I pressed the intercom button. Nothing happened for a long moment. Then, yes. My name is Emma Chen, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. I'm Vivian Chen's granddaughter. I need help. Another pause, then, stay there. 5 minutes later, the gates swung open. A woman in her 50s, dressed professionally, even at this late hour, walked down the drive toward me. Behind her, moving more slowly but with unmistakable purpose, was Grandmother Vivian. She looked older than I remembered, frailer, but her eyes were just as sharp, and when they landed on me, on my too small shoes, my wrinkled school uniform, my exhausted face, they filled with something I hadn't seen in so long I'd almost forgotten what it looked like. Concern. Real, genuine concern for my well-being. Emma, she breathed, and suddenly she was moving faster, and then her arms were around me. And I was crying, really crying, for the first time in years. They forgot me. I sobbed into her expensive silk blouse. They forgot to pick me up from school, for hours. And then I walked home, and they didn't even notice I was gone. They were just eating dinner and laughing, and Shh, she murmured, stroking my hair. I know, darling. Come inside, tell me everything. And I did. We sat in her study, a room lined with books and warmed by a crackling fire. And I told her everything. 7 years of neglect spilled out of me in a torrent I couldn't control even if I'd wanted to. The forgotten birthdays, the missed events, the hand-me-downs while Rachel got the new clothes, the way they'd light up for my sister and barely glance at me, the constant feeling of being a burden, an afterthought, a mistake they'd learned to tolerate. Grandmother Vivian listened without interrupting, her face growing stonier with each revelation. Her assistant, Mrs. Park, took notes on a legal pad with quick, efficient strokes. And your grades? Grandmother asked when I'd finished. Straight A's, I said quietly. I'm ranked second in my class. Second? Rachel is first in her class, top of the seniors. She's brilliant. So are you, from the sound of it. What about activities, sports, clubs? Academic decathlon, debate team. I made captain last month. I hesitated. No one came to the ceremony. Something dangerous flashed in Grandmother's eyes. Emma, I need to tell you something. Something about why your parents and I had a falling out. And she told me. About the visit when I was 6. About the offer she'd made. Equal college funds for both granddaughters, equal support, equal everything. But only if my parents treated us equally. About their refusal, their insistence that they knew best how to parent their children. About how she'd watched from a distance ever since, respecting their wishes but never stopping to care, never stopping to check on the granddaughter she'd seen being overlooked even then. I've made mistakes, she said, her voice thick with regret. I should have fought harder, should have checked on you somehow. I told myself I was respecting boundaries, but the truth is, I was being proud, stubborn. I thought they'd come around, that they'd realize. She shook her head. I'm sorry, Emma. I'm so very sorry. It's not your fault, I said, but my mind was racing. 7 years. She'd been 3 miles away for 7 years, with resources and power and the ability to help. And neither of us had known the other needed saving. What happens now? I asked. Grandmother leaned forward. That depends on what you want. I can call your parents right now, demand better treatment. I can threaten to cut them off financially, though they've already done that themselves by refusing my help. I can call Child Protective Services if you want, or, she paused, or we can be smart about this. Smart how? You're 13. In 5 years, you'll be 18. In 5 years, you'll be free to make your own choices about who you want in your life. Her eyes glinted. 5 years is also enough time to build a case, document everything, and ensure that when you're ready to leave, you leave with leverage. What kind of leverage? Mrs. Park spoke up for the first time. Your grandmother is a wealthy woman, Emma, very wealthy. When she passes, her estate will be divided according to her will. Currently, that will leave everything to be split between your father and his brother, with provisions for you and Rachel as grandchildren. But it doesn't have to stay that way, grandmother continued. Emma, I'm 78 years old. I'm in good health, but I'm not immortal. I can rewrite my will. I can ensure that the granddaughter who was neglected, who raised herself, who achieved despite everything, that she's taken care of, properly taken care of. My heart was pounding. You're talking about cutting them out. I'm talking about justice, she said firmly. I'm talking about making sure that the daughter they forgot, the daughter they treated as disposable, ends up with the resources to build whatever life she wants, free from them, forever. It was tempting. God, it was so tempting. But something in me hesitated. If you rewrite your will now, I said slowly, they'll know something's wrong. They'll figure out I came here. They'll make my life even worse. Grandmother smiled, and it wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a woman who'd built an empire by being smarter than everyone else in the room. Who said anything about doing it now? No, darling. We're going to be patient. We're going to be clever. We're going to document every forgotten pickup, every missed birthday, every bit of neglect. Mrs. Park here is going to help you. And when the time is right, when you're 18 and free, we're going to make sure you have everything you need and they have exactly what they deserve. Which is nothing, she said simply. Absolutely nothing. The will I write tomorrow will leave the bulk of my estate to you, with trust for Rachel if she can prove she built a relationship with you independently of your parents. Your mother and father will get nothing, but we won't let them know until it's too late for them to do anything about it. I should have felt guilty. I should have felt conflicted. But sitting there in that warm study, with the first adult in 7 years who'd looked at me and seen someone worth protecting, all I felt was relief and hunger for justice. What do I need to do? I asked. The plan Grandmother Vivian and Mrs. Park laid out was elegant in its simplicity. I would continue living at home, continue being the forgotten daughter, but I would no longer be alone. I would document everything, every missed event, every forgotten obligation, every moment of casual neglect. Mrs. Park would check in with me weekly, posing as a school counselor or tutor if anyone asked. Grandmother would start building a case file, quiet and thorough, that would make my parents' neglect undeniable. And I would work. I would excel. I would become so academically accomplished, so thoroughly successful, that when the time came to reveal everything, no one could claim I was exaggerating or being dramatic. Let them forget you, Grandmother had said as I prepared to leave that night. Let them ignore you and use that invisibility as a shield while you become unstoppable. She had Mrs. Park drive me home. It was 11:47 p.m. when I walked through the front door. My family was in the living room watching a movie. They glanced up when I entered. "Oh, you're home," my mother said absently. "How was school?" Not, "Where were you?" Not, "We're sorry." Not, "Are you okay? How was school?" "Fine," I said. "Great," my father responded, eyes already back on the TV. "There's leftovers in the fridge if you're hungry." Rachel didn't even look up from her phone. I walked upstairs to my room, the smallest bedroom in the house, and closed the door. Then I pulled out the new phone Grandmother had given me, a good one, expensive, with unlimited data, and opened the Notes app. October 15th, I typed, forgotten at school for 4.5 hours after academic decathlon practice. Parents claimed they got busy. No apology, no concern. They didn't even notice I was missing until I walked in at 11:47 p.m. It was the first entry in what would become a detailed log of the next 4.5 years of my life. True to my word, I never asked them for anything again. Not a ride, not help with homework, not money for school supplies. I figured everything out myself, and when I couldn't, I called Mrs. Park, who became my lifeline to the outside world. The change in me must have been noticeable, but they were too absorbed in Rachel's college drama to notice. Rachel was accepted to Cornell, and the house became a whirlwind of preparation, of shopping trips and planning sessions and tears of pride from my parents. I was 14 by then, finishing 8th grade with a perfect 4.0 and 3 academic competition championships under my belt. I'd also grown 5 inches, finally coming into features that grandmother said looked like her side of the family. Sharp cheekbones, intelligent eyes, a presence that commanded attention. Not that my parents noticed. "Emma, Rachel's graduation is next week," my mother said one morning at breakfast. "We'll need you to stay home from your debate tournament. We need someone to house sit. Not, we want you there. Not, we need you in the family photos, house sit." "Okay," I said mildly. My mother blinked, surprised by my easy compliance. She'd probably expected a fight. The old Emma would have protested, would have explained how important the tournament was. The new Emma just smiled and added another entry to her log. I went to the debate tournament anyway. Mrs. Park picked me up, and grandmother came to watch. We won first place, and grandmother took me to dinner at the nicest restaurant in the city, where I tried escargot for the first time and learned which fork to use for salad. When I got home late that night, my parents' car was in the driveway. The house was dark except for the porch light. No one had noticed I'd left. No one had called to check on me. Perfect. High school began, and with it, new opportunities to excel. I joined every academic club I could, threw myself into competitions, built a resume that would make college admissions officers weep with joy. Grandmother paid for test prep courses, academic summer programs, anything I needed. Mrs. Park drove me everywhere, a silent guardian angel in a sensible sedan. My parents thought I was taking the bus. Rachel came home for Thanksgiving of my freshman year, full of stories about Cornell, about her sorority, about her 3.8 GPA. Everyone hung on her every word. "And you, Emma?" Rachel asked, almost as an afterthought. "How's high school?" "Good," I said. "That's great," she said brightly, already turning back to our parents. "So, anyway, about winter break." I'd been accepted into a prestigious summer program at Yale. I'd won the state debate championship. I'd been recruited for the National Academic Quiz Bowl team. But sure, high school was good. Sophomore year, junior year, they blurred together in a strange sort of double life. At home, I was invisible, forgotten, the daughter who asked for nothing and got exactly that. At school, I was a force to be reckoned with, the girl with perfect grades and a collection of trophies that wouldn't fit in her locker. In grandmother's world, I was the heir apparent, learning about business and estate management, being groomed for a life of success and independence. The documentation grew. 3 ring binders full of entries, each one a small wound. November 28th, sophomore year Thanksgiving dinner. Rachel got gifts from our parents. New laptop, designer purse. I got nothing. When I mentioned it was also Thanksgiving for me, Mom laughed and said, "You know we spent all our money on Rachel's sorority fees." January 15th, junior year parent-teacher conferences. My teachers raved about my performance to an empty room. Mom and Dad went to Rachel's college to visit her instead. Didn't tell me they weren't coming. April 3rd, junior year. Rachel called to say she was dropping by. Mom spent $300 on groceries for her favorite meals. I asked if we could also get bread and peanut butter since we were out. Was told use your own money. Each entry was verified, time-stamped, often with photo evidence. Mrs. Park was meticulous about record keeping. We were building not just a case, but an irrefutable proof of systematic neglect. And then came senior year, and with it, the beginning of the end. I was 17, captain of the debate team, president of the National Honor Society, ranked first in my class with a 4.0 unweighted and a 5.0 weighted GPA. I'd taken every AP class our school offered and scored 5S on all of them. My SAT score was a 1580. My college essay had made my English teacher cry. I'd applied to Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, and MIT. Safety schools included UCLA and UC Berkeley. My parents knew none of this. They'd never asked. Rachel, meanwhile, was finishing up at Cornell with a 3.5 GPA and plans to take a gap year to find herself in Europe. On our parents' dime, naturally. Emma, my father said one night in September of my senior year, we need to talk about college. I looked up from my homework, surprised. They never initiated conversations with me. Your mother and I have been thinking, he continued, not quite meeting my eyes. College is expensive, very expensive. And we've already put Rachel through 4 years at an Ivy League school. I saw where this was going. We think it might be better if you consider community college for the first 2 years. My mother jumped in. You can live at home, save money, and then maybe transfer to a state school. It's the practical choice. Rachel needed Cornell for her future, my father added. She's going to do great things, but you're more practical, sensible. Community college would be perfect for you. They'd finally noticed me, and only to tell me I wasn't worth investing in. Okay, I said calmly. They blinked, surprised. They'd been braced for a fight. Really? My mother asked. Sure, I said. I'll apply to community college. I didn't tell them I'd already been accepted to Harvard with a full scholarship, one of only 12 students nationwide to receive it. I didn't tell them that Yale, Princeton, and Stanford had also accepted me with generous aid packages. I didn't tell them that I'd been personally called by admissions officers who wanted me, specifically me, at their universities. I just smiled and went back to my homework. That night, I called grandmother. They just tried to tell me community college is all I deserve, I said, my voice shaking with fury I'd held in during the conversation. Perfect, she said, and I could hear the cold satisfaction in her voice. Absolutely perfect. Oh, Emma, they've played right into our hands. What do you mean? I mean, it's time, she said. You turn 18 in 2 months. You graduate in 8 months. It's time to start executing the final phase of our plan. My heart raced, which is, patience, darling. Let me make some calls, but I promise you this. By the time you graduate, your parents are going to realize exactly what they've lost. And by then, it will be far too late. The plan came together over the next few weeks, coordinated by grandmother, Mrs. Park, and a small army of lawyers. First, grandmother officially updated her will. The estate, worth approximately $47 million after taxes, would be divided as follows. $45 million to me, in a trust I'd gain full access to at age 25, with distributions for education and living expenses starting immediately upon her death. $1 million to Rachel, conditional on her maintaining a relationship with me independent of our parents for at least 2 years. The remaining $1 million split between various charities. Our parents got nothing. Zero, not a cent. Second, we began the process of filing for legal emancipation. With my 18th birthday approaching and college acceptance letters in hand, this was mostly a formality, but it would send a message. I was no longer their responsibility, and they had no claim on me or my future. Third, and most devastatingly, Mrs. Park compiled the documentation from the past 4.5 years into a comprehensive dossier. Every missed event, every forgotten birthday, every moment of casual neglect and outright favoritism. Photos of me in too small clothes while Rachel wore designer brands. Report cards they'd never looked at. Award certificates they'd never acknowledged. A timeline of systematic emotional abuse and neglect that was damning in its thoroughness. This is for leverage, grandmother explained. We don't want to destroy them publicly. That would make you look vindictive. But we want them to know that we could. That if they try to fight the will, try to claim you were influenced or manipulated, we have proof of exactly why you chose to cut them out of your life. When do we tell them? I asked. Graduation day, she said. After the ceremony, after you've given your valedictorian speech, after the photos and the celebration. We'll invite them to dinner at my house. Tell them it's a family reconciliation, and we'll tell them everything. I felt a flutter of nerves. That's so far away. Good things come to those who wait, darling, and revenge is best served with patience. She was right, of course. The waiting was part of the punishment. November came, and with it my 18th birthday. My parents forgot, as usual. Rachel called from Europe to say happy birthday, sounding slightly guilty that she'd almost forgotten too. You should visit me in Paris, she said. I'm having the most amazing time. Although, between you and me, I'm running a little low on funds. Do you think you could ask mom and dad to send me some money? They're not answering my calls. I'll mention it, I lied. That night, grandmother threw me a small party, just her, Mrs. Park, and a few of the teachers and mentors who'd actually supported me over the years. The cake was beautiful, the gifts were thoughtful, and when everyone sang happy birthday, I cried. These are happy tears, I assured them, laughing through the emotions. For the first time in my life, I feel seen. You are seen, grandmother said firmly, and you are extraordinary. December brought early admission decisions. I'd applied to Harvard Early Action, and the acceptance letter came on a cold Tuesday afternoon. Full scholarship. Personal note from the Dean of Admissions praising my exceptional academic record and demonstrated leadership. I framed the letter and hung it in my room. My parents walked past it for 3 weeks before my mother noticed. "What's that?" she asked absently, pausing in my doorway. "Harvard acceptance letter," I said, not looking up from my book. "Oh, that's nice. Is it one of those fake ones they send to everyone to encourage applications?" I finally looked at her. "No, Mom, it's a real acceptance letter. I got in. Full scholarship." She laughed. "Emma, don't be silly. Harvard doesn't just give full scholarships. And anyway, we talked about this. You're going to community college?" "Right," I said. "Community college." She left, shaking her head at my imagination. I added it to the log. January through April were a blur of final applications, scholarship competitions, and preparations for graduation. I won a national essay contest, $50,000 prize. I was named a presidential scholar, one of 161 students nationwide. I gave a TED Talk at my school about overcoming adversity. I was featured in the local newspaper as student to watch. My parents never read the article, never asked about the awards, never noticed the plaques accumulating in my room. They were too busy planning Rachel's welcome home party. She was returning from Europe in May, just in time for my graduation, and our parents were throwing her a huge celebration to welcome her back. Not for my graduation, mind you, for her return. "You don't mind, do you?" my mother asked in that tone that wasn't really asking. "It's just we haven't seen Rachel in so long, and graduation is just a little ceremony. This party will be something special." "I don't mind," I said truthfully, because by then I knew something they didn't. Their days of forgetting me were numbered. The countdown had begun. And when it ended, everything would change. Graduation day dawned bright and clear, one of those perfect June mornings that felt designed for ceremonies and celebrations. I woke up in my small room, looked around at the sparse furniture and hand-me-down decorations, and smiled. The last time I'd wake up in this room, the last day I'd be the forgotten daughter. Tomorrow, I'd be someone else entirely. I dressed carefully in the white dress grandmother had bought me. Simple but elegant. Nothing like the cheap clothes I usually wore. I did my makeup with care, styled my hair into soft waves. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized myself, and I looked confident, self-assured, like someone who knew exactly what she was worth. "Emma!" my mother called up the stairs. "We're leaving in 10 minutes." I took one last look around the room, grabbed the valedictorian medal I'd been too afraid to display, and headed downstairs. My family was clustered by the door. Rachel, home since yesterday, looked beautiful in a designer dress I knew cost more than my entire wardrobe. My parents were dressed nicely, already taking photos with her. "Oh, you're ready," my father said, glancing at me. "Good, let's go." No photos with me. No comment on how I looked, just efficiency. Let's get this over with. We drove to the school in silence. Rachel chattered about Paris, about the boys she'd met, about the art and the culture and the food. My parents hung on every word. When we arrived, Rachel spotted some of her old friends and rushed off to say hi. My parents followed to catch up with other parents they knew. I walked to the gymnasium alone. "Emma!" Mrs. Park appeared at my elbow, elegant in a navy dress. "You look beautiful, darling. Are you ready?" "So ready," I said. "Your grandmother is already seated. Front row, center. She wanted you to know she's watching." I scanned the crowd and found her. Grandmother Vivian, in a stunning silver suit, caught my eye and nodded once. A warrior's acknowledgement. The ceremony began. I sat on stage with the other honor students. my valedictorian medal heavy around my neck. I watched my classmates receive their diplomas, heard the cheers and applause from families who'd actually cared about their children's education. When it came time for the valedictorian speech, I walked to the podium with my heart pounding. Good morning, everyone, I began, my voice steady. For those who don't know me, I'm Emma Chen, and I've had the honor of serving as this year's class valedictorian. I paused, looking out at the crowd. My parents were in the back, barely paying attention, probably waiting for this to be over. Rachel was on her phone. But Grandmother Vivian leaned forward, her eyes bright with anticipation. I want to talk today about invisibility, I continued, about what it means to be overlooked, underestimated, forgotten. Because for a long time, that was my story. I was the girl who was easy to forget, the one who didn't demand attention, who didn't make noise, who simply existed in the spaces between other people's priorities. Now my parents were paying attention, shifting uncomfortably. But here's what I learned. Invisibility can be a gift. Because while everyone is looking elsewhere, you're free to work, to grow, to become more than anyone thought possible. You're free to exceed every low expectation, to disprove every assumption, to become extraordinary while everyone else is busy being ordinary. I pulled out my phone and projected images onto the screen behind me. Photos of my awards, my competitions, my achievements. 4.5 years of excellence that my parents had never acknowledged. I learned that you don't need people to believe in you to succeed. You just need to believe in yourself. I learned that the best revenge against those who underestimate you isn't anger, it's excellence. It's becoming so undeniably successful that their oversight becomes their loss, not yours. More photos flashed by. Me at Harvard's Accepted Students Day, which I'd attended without telling my parents. Me receiving the Presidential Scholar Award in Washington, D.C., a ceremony I'd gone to alone. Me winning competition after competition, building a future brick by brick while my family looked the other way. To my fellow graduates, some of you have been seen and celebrated every step of the way. Cherish that. Some of you, like me, have done this alone. Be proud of that, because you've proven you don't need permission to be extraordinary. You don't need validation to achieve greatness. You just need determination, intelligence, and the willingness to bet on yourself when no one else will. I looked directly at my parents for the first time. Thank you to those who supported me. You know who you are. My eyes found Grandmother Vivian, who nodded, her eyes suspiciously bright. And to those who didn't, thank you too. You taught me the most valuable lesson of all. I don't need you. I never did. I was always enough on my own. The applause was thunderous. My classmates, who'd watched me win competition after competition, gave me a standing ovation. Teachers were crying. And in the front row, Grandmother Vivian was beaming with pride. In the back, my parents looked stricken, finally understanding that something monumental had just happened and they'd missed all of it. But it wasn't over, not even close. After the ceremony, after the diploma handouts and the cap tossing and the photos, my parents found me in the crowd. Emma, that was quite a speech, my father said, his voice carefully neutral. Very dramatic, my mother added with a forced laugh. Though I'm not sure where all those photos came from. We didn't know about half those events. I know, I said simply, an awkward pause. Well, we should go, my father said. Rachel's party is in a few hours and we still need to pick up the cake. Actually, Mrs. Park appeared beside me. Emma has other plans this evening. I'm sorry, who are you? My mother asked, her tone sharpening. I'm Mrs. Park, Emma's attorney and family representative. Emma has been invited to dinner at Vivian Chen's estate tonight. You're invited as well, all of you. She handed my father a thick envelope. The address and time are inside, along with some documentation we thought you should review before the dinner. My father opened the envelope, and I watched his face drain of color as he pulled out the top sheet, a summary of Grandmother's updated will. This is, he stammered, this can't be. Real? It's very real, Mrs. Park said pleasantly, as is the emancipation paperwork, which Emma will be signing tonight, and the comprehensive documentation of the past 4.5 years. It's all there. We suggest you read it carefully. Emma, what is this? My mother demanded, snatching the papers from my father. As she read, her face went from pale to red. This is ridiculous. You can't just cut us out. We're your parents. You're right, I said calmly. You are my parents. You just never acted like it. We raised you, fed you, gave you a home. The bare minimum, I agreed. You did the bare minimum required by law. Congratulations. You ungrateful little. My mother started, but Rachel cut her off. Wait, what's going on? She'd been reading over our father's shoulder, and now her face was confused. Grandma Vivian? But I thought, and Emma, you've been seeing her for years? Yes, I said. Since that day you all forgot to pick me up from school, remember? Actually, you probably don't. It wasn't important enough to remember. That was years ago, my father protested. You can't still be upset about that. It wasn't just that day, Dad. It was every day. Every missed event, every forgotten birthday, every moment you chose Rachel over me. But you're right. I'm not upset anymore. I'm past that. I'm just done. Rachel, talk to your sister, my mother pleaded. Tell her she's being irrational. But Rachel was staring at me with an expression I'd never seen before. Recognition, maybe, or guilt. Is it true? She asked quietly. All of this? They really treated you that differently. You were there, Rachel. You saw it. I didn't think. She trailed off, then tried again. I thought you just didn't care about that stuff, that you preferred to be independent. I didn't prefer it, I said. I just didn't have a choice. The dinner is at 7, Mrs. Park interjected smoothly. We expect you all there. Emma has more she needs to say, and Mrs. Chen would like to address the family. Don't be late. She turned to me. Ready, dear? Ready. I walked away from my parents without looking back, leaving them standing in the parking lot with an envelope full of their failures and an invitation to face the consequences. Grandmother's house was transformed for the evening. The dining room table was set with formal china and crystal. A photographer was stationed discreetly in the corner. For documentation, Mrs. Park explained. A notary public waited in the study, and a lawyer I didn't recognize sat in the parlor, reviewing papers. Everything is ready, Grandmother said, taking my hands. Are you sure you want to do this? We can still walk it back, wait until you're in college and have more distance. I'm sure, I said. I've been sure since the day I walked 7 miles home and realized they'd never even noticed I was gone. She nodded. Then let's finish this. My family arrived at exactly 7 o'clock. They'd clearly been arguing. My mother's eyes were red, my father's jaw was tight, and Rachel looked shell-shocked. Welcome, Grandmother said coolly. Please sit. They sat around the formal dining table looking distinctly uncomfortable. I sat at Grandmother's right hand, Mrs. Park at her left. The lawyer sat at the foot of the table. I suppose you've had time to review the materials, Grandmother began without preamble. This is extortion, my father said immediately. You can't. I can do whatever I want with my money, David. Grandmother cut him off sharply. It's mine. I earned it, and I get to decide who deserves it. Emma is being manipulative, my mother jumped in. She's turned you against us with lies and exaggerations. Actually, Mrs. Park said, sliding identical folders across the table to each of them, Emma has been meticulously documenting your treatment of her for 4.5 years. Everything in these folders is verified, time-stamped, and in many cases, photographed or recorded. There are no lies, no exaggerations, just facts. I watched as they opened the folders, watched as they saw the timeline of their neglect laid out in irrefutable detail, watched as they realized just how badly they'd failed. This is... My father started, then stopped. There was nothing he could say. Why didn't you tell us? My mother tried. If you were so unhappy, why didn't you say something? I laughed, the sound bitter. I did tell you. Every time I asked for help with homework and you were too busy with Rachel. Every time I mentioned an award and you changed the subject. Every time I tried to show you I mattered and you proved I didn't. I told you constantly. You just never listened. Rachel got more attention because she was older, my father said weakly. She had more immediate needs. Even now, I interrupted. Even now, you're making excuses, defending your favoritism. Do you want to know what's in that folder that really makes me angry? It's not the forgotten birthdays or the missed events, it's the expenses. I opened my own copy to a specific page and slid it across to them. This is a financial breakdown of what you spent on Rachel versus what you spent on me over the last 4 years. The difference is $127,000. They stared at the numbers in silence. That's how much more you invested in her than in me, I continued. College application fees, SAT prep, college visits, sorority dues, that semester abroad, the car you bought her apartment furnishings. Meanwhile, I bought my own school supplies with money I earned babysitting. We were going to help you with college, my mother said, but her voice was hollow. We just said you should start at community college to save money. While Rachel went to Cornell at $80,000 a year, I finished. Yes, I know. That's why I'm glad I won't need your help. Harvard gave me a full scholarship. So did Yale, Princeton, and Stanford. I had my pick, actually. I'm going to Harvard. The shock on their faces was almost comical. When did you? My father started. Apply? Last year. I got an early admission in December. I've known for 6 months. I just never told you because you never asked. Rachel spoke for the first time since sitting down. Emma, I didn't know. I swear I didn't realize it was this bad. I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw genuine distress in her eyes. I know you didn't. You were living your life. I don't blame you for that, but I'm not going to pretend we're close anymore either. The point of this dinner, grandmother said, bringing the conversation back on track, is not to relitigate the past. It's to establish the future. I've updated my will. Emma is now my primary heir. Rachel will receive a smaller bequest on the condition that she builds an independent relationship with her sister, no involvement from you two. She looked at my parents coldly. You are no longer in my will at all. You can't do this, my mother cried. I absolutely can, and I have. The papers are signed, witnessed, and filed. It's done. We'll contest it, my father threatened. We'll prove Emma manipulated you. With what evidence? The lawyer spoke up for the first time. A grandmother providing for a neglected grandchild? Supporting her education and well-being? That's not manipulation, that's good judgment, especially when contrasted with your treatment of her, which is documented extensively. If you contest this will, all of that documentation becomes public record in court. Every forgotten birthday, every missed event, every dollar you spent on Rachel and not Emma, it will be humiliating for you. The silence that followed was deafening. So what now? My father finally asked, defeated. Now, I said, you sign the emancipation papers acknowledging that I'm no longer your dependent. You agree to have no claim on my finances, my future, or my decisions. In return, I won't press charges for neglect. Charges? My mother gasped. You left a 13-year-old at school for nearly 5 hours, Mrs. Park said mildly. In most states, that's considered child endangerment. And that's just one incident of many. We'll be generous, grandmother added. You can still tell people Emma's going to Harvard. You can bask in that reflected glory if you want. You can even try to rebuild a relationship with her, though I suspect that ship has sailed. But you will never profit from her again. Never use her achievements to make yourselves feel better about your failures. Never pretend you supported her when you did the opposite. My father looked at me with something that might have been regret. Emma, we didn't mean... Yes, you did, I said simply. You meant every bit of it. You chose Rachel over me every single time. I understand that now. I've accepted it, and I've moved on. The question is, can you accept the consequences? They signed the papers. What choice did they have? When dinner was over, a tense, mostly silent affair where no one ate much, my parents and Rachel left. At the door, Rachel turned back. Emma, she said softly, can we talk later, just us? I considered. Maybe. If you actually want to know me as a person, not just as your little sister you never noticed. We'll see. She nodded, looking smaller than I'd ever seen her, and left. When the door closed behind them, I turned to grandmother and Mrs. Park. It's done, I said, and felt something unknot in my chest that had been tight for years. It's really done. It's done, grandmother agreed, pulling me into a hug. And you, my dear, are free. The epilogue to this story takes place over the next 8 years, so let me give you the highlights. I went to Harvard. I thrived there, made real friends for the first time, and discovered what it was like to be around people who actually valued intelligence and hard work. I graduated magna cum laude with a degree in business and economics, then got my MBA from Stanford. Grandmother Vivian lived to be 86. She passed peacefully in her sleep during my senior year of college, and I was with her at the end. The will was executed exactly as she'd written it. I inherited $45 million. dollars. Rachel got her $1 million. She'd actually made an effort to know me, awkward as it was, and we'd developed a tentative friendship built on honesty rather than obligation. My parents got nothing, and they contested it anyway. The case was humiliating for them, exactly as predicted. Every detail of their neglect became public record. The judge's ruling was scathing. The court finds no evidence of undue influence, only evidence of a grandmother ensuring her neglected grandchild was properly provided for. Mr. and Mrs. Chen, you failed your daughter. You don't get to profit from her now. With grandmother's money, I started a foundation for kids aging out of foster care and children from neglectful homes. It provides college scholarships, mentorship, and support for the invisible kids. The ones who, like me, learned to raise themselves because the adults in their lives couldn't be bothered. I bought myself a beautiful house, not ostentatious, but comfortable, with a library and a garden. I filled it with things I loved, not hand-me-downs, and I never once felt guilty about it. My parents tried to reach out several times over the years, first with demands, then with pleas, then with guilt trips about how I'd torn the family apart. I never responded. I'd said everything I needed to say that night at grandmother's dinner table. Rachel and I see each other a few times a year. She's built a decent life for herself, working in marketing and actually earning her own success rather than coasting on my parents' favoritism. She apologized once, really apologized, for not seeing what was happening when we were kids. I accepted it. We'll never be close, but we're cordial. Sometimes that's enough. As for me, I'm 26 now. I run my foundation, invest my money wisely, and live exactly the life I want. I'm dating a wonderful man who thinks my driven nature is attractive, not threatening. I have real friends who showed up for me when I needed them. I have a chosen family of people who see me, value me, and would never dream of forgetting me. Sometimes, late at night, I think about that 13-year-old girl waiting at school for hours, watching car after car leave without her. I think about how small she felt, how invisible, how convinced she was that there was something wrong with her that made her unlovable. And I wish I could tell her, there's nothing wrong with you. You're not too much or too little. You're not forgettable or disposable. You're extraordinary. You just can't see it yet because the people who should have shown you were too blind to recognize what they had, but you'll see it eventually. You'll walk 7 miles home and never ask them for anything again. You'll stop waiting for them to notice you and start building a life they can't touch. You'll meet people who do see you, who do value you, who would never dream of forgetting you. You'll win. Not because you destroyed them, though you'll have the power to if you wanted, but because you'll succeed so thoroughly, so completely, that their opinion of you won't matter anymore. You'll be free, and that, ultimately, is the best revenge of all, living so well that the people who forgot you become completely irrelevant to your happiness. I learned to be enough on my own that day. Everything after that was just proving it to the world. They forgot to pick me up from school for hours. I walked home and never asked again. Best decision I ever made.